In new data shared exclusively with Cheddar, Social Flow reports that blue states are overwhelmingly more interested online than people in red states, even surpassing clicks in Georgia itself. And joining us now is Jim Anderson, the CEO of Social Flow. Jim, good morning to you. Why do you think states like Michigan more invested than states like Florida, for example?
Well, Jill, it's interesting. We generally see blue states tend to click more on all media content than red states. So that's the first thing to note. So in some regards, that's not surprising. But when we did this analysis and we looked at this Georgia election specifically, you would certainly expect Georgians to be more interested in the Georgia election. But there were 9 blue states that were actually more interested than Georgia, which itself is a blue state, at least as defined by the fact that they voted for President Biden, President-elect Biden. And so it's just sort of fascinating to see there's such a strong blue interest in this. And I suspect it's all about the Senate control, which clearly has national implications.
What kind of impact do you think this online interest from out of state has on the election itself?
Well, it's certainly it means there's a lot of eyes on there. I mean, we've seen, the politicians going. President Trump was there last night with a rally. Former President Obama was there rallying. All of the President-elect Biden has been to Georgia. So I think it just shows the national scope of this election. And I think it's funny. I'm from Georgia. I moved to New York from Georgia 5 years ago. My Facebook feed is full of posts from my friends in Georgia saying, I'm just exhausted by all the political advertising. I think they just want it to be over, because if you are in Georgia and everybody's looking at you and everybody's trying to get your attention and everybody's trying to convince you that their candidate's better than the others, I think there's a definite sense of fatigue from people who live there in Georgia.
I could only imagine. Here in New York, we don't really get any of it, right? You don't really get attention from the presidential candidates, and of course we're not really invested in the runoff either. I know you also studied whether social media users, what they're sharing, what kind of political articles they're sharing mostly. What did you find out?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's this conventional wisdom, and it really seems to spike around political season, around elections, that, people are sharing stuff without reading it, right? I mean, that's sort of become, it's almost like a myth or an urban legend that that's what people do on social media. And of course, it does happen, right? People will share something, they don't even bother to read it. And I think that sort of represents to many of us the worst elements of social media. So we actually looked at the data. We have 1 billion clicks worth of data from major media companies going through our platform every month. And so we actually sat down and looked at it. We said, let's look at the click data, let's look at the share data. And it was actually quite striking. The sharing data is not nearly as prevalent as the click data, right? You'll typically get 100 times the clicks, which is actually what somebody reading the story, if you will, than the shares. And it's only a very small percentage, like less than 0.1% of the content is actually shared more than it's read. And that's really the only situation where you can get sort of widespread sharing without reading. And the interesting twist on that is a lot of that was not political content. It was things like Alex Trebek has passed away, right? Where basically the entire story is the headline. So if somebody shares a Facebook post or a tweet about Alex Trebek, or before that it was Sean Connery was dead at age 90, that was a notable BBC headline. And that was, of course, shared tremendously. I don't think there's anything wrong with that when the entire story is effectively in the headline.
That's really interesting. So you're finding that people are more likely to share something if it's just kind of all out there at the top.
Right. That's exactly right. And some of that, to be clear, is politics, right? If there's a particularly explosive political allegation, if you will, or whether it be on the right or the left, there was one about Vice President-elect Kamala Harris and something about her not prosecuting gang members. That one was shared more than it was clicked. On the left, there was something about President Trump and a rally, which is a super spreader COVID event. That was shared more than it was clicked. So you will see those things, but it's really a small minority of all of the posts. And really even a minority of the posts that are shared more than they're clicked on or read.
I know you mentioned that people in Georgia have just kind of politics fatigue at this point, but are you also finding that nationwide there's just less interest as well in politics at this point?
It's definitely tapered off, right? I mean, we saw the giant spike in and around the election and then the breathless period afterwards while we're trying to understand who won the election. And it's definitely tapered off. There's a little bit of a spike in the past week in Georgia, predictably as we come up to actually election day today. But it was nowhere near the spike. And I think the large proportion of the country, again, aside from the national interest, if you're into politics and you're following the control of the Senate, you know how important this is. But I think most people have sort of moved on. And I will tell you, even at its peak, even on Election Day and right after Election Day. You know, election-related Facebook posts and tweets got a lot of clicks, but still, they didn't compare to a Kim Kardashian post, right? Celebrity content outperforms politics, you know, even on Election Day.
I don't know if I'm totally surprised by that. All right, Jim Anderson, CEO of Social Flow. So great to have you on. Appreciate it.